Welcome to the Knight's Book Club podcast. My name is Mason Knight. Sitting across from me is my sister, Michaelides Knight. There she is right there. And this is our very first episode of the Knight's Book Club. We are very excited to talk about our first book here. But before we do that, you guys could please be sure, if you're watching on YouTube, to smash that like button, comment below, and subscribe to the channel. It really does help. And leave a comment below. Let us know what book recommendation you guys would like, because inevitably, me and Michaeli have came up with an idea that we will be picking books in the comment section to review. But Michaeli, I'm very excited to start this podcast. And before we kind of get into anything else, because it is our inaugural, very first podcast, this podcast between you and I has been in development for a while.
Yeah.
We had talked about it a lot. I mean, for at least a year.
Yeah.
And at times I was like, yeah, maybe you should, start your own. And then I was like, well, and then I had an epiphany one day at work as I'm listening to an audiobook. I'm like, why don't I just do the podcast with my sister? It would be perfect. And then, it gives us an excuse to hang out and stuff every single week and talk more. And I just, I'm very excited because I've come to realize that audiobooks, like listening to them at work, I don't always get to read a book, which is unfortunate, but I'm very busy. But audiobooks, you literally get immersed in the world.
Yeah.
And it's like a movie, I mean,
it really is.
Yeah.
Because when you're listening to an audiobook as well as reading a normal book, you can kind of picture everything going on in your head and all of the different scenes and the characters, and you kind of form your own vision of who you think those characters are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm very excited. Michaeli, what got you into books? How long have you been reading?
Well, it's kind of funny because when I was little, Mom used to make us read books, and I absolutely hated it. And then once I got into like high school, junior and senior years, when I really started reading a lot of books. And there wasn't like a specific turning point. I was just like, oh, I'm going to read a book. And then I did, and I became like obsessed with it. Yeah. Especially this past summer. I read so many books this summer.
Yeah, you did. I'd always see you outside reading a book. I'm like, Michaeli, what are you reading right now? Yeah. You're like, oh, this book is so good. I'll tell you why.
Floating in the pool on a floaty.
Reading the book.
Or when Logan was like training to get into the Navy.
Yeah.
He would go swim laps in the lake near our house, and I would just be sitting there reading a book.
On the beach, reading a book.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm super excited, Michaeli. This is, we're finally here. It kind of feels a little surreal, like actually finally starting it and doing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, what book are we reviewing today?
We're reviewing The Silent Patient by Michaelides.
Yes.
Yeah.
What we're going to do, so kind of the outline, we'll talk about the outline of the podcast too, because this is all very new to us as far as how we're going to go about doing it. And we'll get it down to a science eventually, but no pressure here today for the first one. But what we're going to try to do in these episodes, so for YouTube, we're going to drop a spoiler-free kind of overview of the book, kind of our generic thoughts on it. And then after that, we'll jump into a summary, full review of the book with spoilers. Mm-hmm. And then what we'll do is we'll kind of talk about the next book that we're going to do in the coming week.
Yeah.
Which will be good for us. And then in podcast format, you're just going to get all three of those in one episode. So it'll be pretty easy if you listen on the audio side. But for YouTube, that's kind of the game plan right now. But always feel free. Go check out Knight's Book Club on all social medias. It's all the same. Michaeli's going to be running our Instagram, and I know she's going to crush. I've already seen her outline. She's very detailed, super organized with that social media. I'm like ecstatic. I really believe, Michaeli, that like you're going to be able to build that Instagram because like you just get it. Like it's aesthetically pleasing, the work that I've seen. You haven't posted anything, but you're creating all the artwork and stuff, and it's just like really good work. Like I'm excited.
I thought it was going to be more difficult, but it's actually pretty easy.
Yeah. Once you get the hang of it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Canva. Shout out to you guys.
Yeah, Canva's pretty awesome. I do
Sponsor
love it.
Me.
Yeah, yeah. Well worth the $11 or $12 a month, that's for sure. Because there's so many things you can do on that app. But not a Canva podcast. Let's talk about The Silent Patient here, Michaeli. Mm-hmm. So the publishing date for this book was February 9th. Shout out to Ken Dog, his birthday, 2019. The genre for this book is a thriller, mystery, psychological thriller, psychological fiction.
Yeah.
And do you want to give a little background on Alex?
Yeah, so Alex Michaelides was born in Cyprus to a Greek father, so keep that in mind, it comes up later, and an English mother. He has a degree in English literature from Cambridge and an MA in screenwriting at the American Film Institute in LA. And he has also studied psychotherapy, and he's worked in a secure unit.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Well, and he does have some sort of background, and you do see the theme
Right.
with Alex here, because, you know, there's obviously another book that was just recently released from him called The Maidens, or The Maids.
I think it's The Maidens.
The Maidens, yeah, which has a lot to do, and I guess has a cameo appearance from this book in that book.
Yeah.
From a character. We have yet to review or listen to that, but nonetheless, it is interesting that he does actually have a background in psychotherapy. So,
which is really cool because, you know, we haven't gotten into it, but, you know, this book is a psychological thriller, and some of the characters, we'll get into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good callback.
It is. So if you are actually a reader of the book, the page count for this is 336 pages. A decent-sized book. I'd say pretty
really
average.
It's really not a lot.
No. Yeah, there's some books that are crazy. There's one eventually we're going to do one day called The Stand, which is a Stephen King book. And the Audible alone is 48 hours long. I guess book is like 1,500 pages or something like that. It's crazy.
The Book Thief, that's a thick book, and I've been wanting to read it forever.
So we'll talk about the synopsis of The Silent Patient here. Alicia is a painter who murdered her husband, Gabriel. She was 33 at the time of the murder, and Gabriel was 44. Authorities discovered Alicia at the scene. She had shot Gabriel 5 times in the head and then slit her wrists. Alicia has not spoken since that fateful day. The only clue as to her state of mind following the murder is a self-portrait she created and signed with ALCESTIS. She was committed to a mental institution called the Grove, and that's kind of where the whole story begins.
Yeah.
So, Michaeli, we're talking about this book. We talked about the aspects and the genre of it being a psychological thriller. Can you kind of give us your general thoughts overall on kind of what you were expecting from the book? With this very, and I gotta hats off, whoever made the actual art or the design, the book cover, did a really good job. It's very like mesmerizing, and it kind of puts you in that psychological mood in such a weird way. But like, so looking at the book cover, kind of reading the synopsis, what were your immediate thoughts? How did you think was this book anything like you thought it was going to be?
Well, honestly, it's definitely not what I thought it was going to be. Okay. I saw it at Barnes & Noble a couple of years ago, and I've been wanting to buy it, just never got around to it. But, I mean, for the most part, I was really engaged in the book, especially during Alicia's therapy sessions. That was, like, the main thing that grabbed hold of me and just, like, sunk its talons into me. It's really not what I thought it was going to be, which is surprising because I can usually guess the ending of a book before I do my spoilers.
Right. Yeah.
All I have to say without giving too much away, because we're still in the spoiler-free part, is it's definitely not what I thought it was going to be at all.
Yeah, I think for me, initially going into it after reading the synopsis, which definitely intrigued me. I love the concept of this artist, this obviously, and most artists have a troubled past, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just, and not all, but most do. And just the mystery surrounding this as far as why this woman who had the perfect life would just randomly shoot her husband in the head 5 times.
Yeah.
And then never say a word after that. And that intrigued me so much because that's the mystery behind the book is like, why? Why did she stay silent? And for me, it was a bit of a plot twist because towards the end of the book, and again, spoiler free, but towards the end of the book, it's kind of just turned on its head and you're like, oh, wow, that was,
right.
Those aspects were a lot simpler than I could have imagined, but it still kind of veered me towards this different way. And I did enjoy the book. There are a lot of things that I really did enjoy about this book, but I do want to talk about some of the things spoiler free that were a little underwhelming.
Yeah.
And I think I think in the aspect of side characters, they're a little too on the nose for me and not well enough fleshed out.
Yeah.
I did love the narration. Spoiler free. If you're listening to this on Audible, the voice actors who do this book, the narration is really well done from both, from the two individuals, from the point of Alicia's side, obviously, and Theo's side. They both did a really good job, but aspects for me fell short. Side characters. What were your thoughts on those?
There were definitely a lot of red herrings.
Yeah.
That I was like, and it just, for the most part, it genuinely frustrated me. For a lot of the characters, we never got, like an answer or an ending to them. They just were kind of like thrown in for, if I was physically reading the book, it would be for a couple pages and then they just didn't come up at all. And that genuinely frustrated me because I don't like loose ends.
Yes.
It really bothered me because I was like, I mean, this is once again a spoiler-free part, so I can't really get into it, but I don't know, it hurt my feelings. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, yeah, and I did actually think that we would get into more of like her crazy aunt.
Yeah.
And again, these aren't spoilers because it doesn't affect the book in any which way. But there is a past behind Alicia's kind of craziness.
Which makes sense.
Which makes sense for like what happened to her later on. Let's talk about some of your favorite parts, Michaeli. What were some of your favorite parts about this book?
The therapy sessions with Theo and his therapist Ruth. That woman, I fell in love with her. She has a special place in my heart. She has so many good quotes. Like, I'll read one. It says, about love, about how often we mistake love for fireworks, for drama and dysfunction. But real love is very quiet, very still. It's boring if seen from the perspective of high drama. Love is deep, calm, and constant. I love that. She is so wise, and she genuinely cares about her patients. Yeah. And she wants to know how they are. And the one time when he just like showed up on her doorstep, she welcomed him with open arms, and she was like genuinely concerned about him. And if I ever got a therapist, I would want my therapist to be exactly like Ruth. Yeah. She's just an all around a very developed character, and I love that.
And see, that's where this book shines, are in those aspects. And I think that's where Alex's strong suit is, because he is a psychotherapist. Yeah. So he understands how these conversations go about and dissecting kind of the science behind it. And that's where he did a really good job with the book. And I want to give him credit for it, absolutely, because I do not think this book is terrible by any stretch of the imagination. There were things that could obviously been improved upon. But again, it's rare to find a book that's going to be perfect. And that's where, as far as like fleshed out characters, we don't get Ruth that much, but the times that we get, we learn so much about her. We know exactly where she's at. She's a very well fleshed out character. But then on the other sides, like Barbie, the neighbor. And like, again, no spoilers here, but like the Barbie was just such a one-dimensional character for me. There was nothing, you didn't care. She wasn't likable. She wasn't, it was just very bland, it was stereotypical. And I just wish we would have got more in depth to like those characters, because they do come up and they are important in the book.
Yeah. As well as, when I was writing my notes, I accidentally called him Jean-Ralphio, from Parks and Rec. Yeah. But his name's Jean Felix.
Jean Felix, yes.
I wish we knew more about him, because he was Alicia's friend, and we didn't get a lot about him.
We didn't get a lot, but the aspects we did get on the side of were very important towards the story. And that's where like I can have a little sympathy for, because like we definitely knew his intentions by Alicia's perspective in the diary. Yeah. But we didn't get a lot of time with the actual character. But we definitely got that relationship dynamic where, they're friends and whatnot, and then like things slowly start to turn, and life changes, people grow apart and they change, but there was always that holding over her head.
Yeah, and I appreciated Alex's writing for Alicia when she was talking to Jean-Felix about them growing apart, because that happens in friendships, and there's nothing wrong with that. People grow, people change.
Yep.
And that's one part that I really did enjoy. His writing on, like, Alicia's perspective of that. I was like, oh, good for Alicia. I was like, go you, girl, grow.
So let's talk about this, because we're about 15 minutes in now to our spoiler free. I told you we could go about this for a while, even spoiler free.
I was like, oh.
But let's talk about the predictability of the book a little bit, Michaeli. What are some of your thoughts, without obviously giving away the plot or any spoilers, but like what did you think predictability on a scale of like 1 to 10? Where were you? What surprised you? What didn't?
I would have to say the predictability for me personally was probably like a 7.
Yeah.
But I didn't manage to predict exactly what happened, and it wasn't easy to guess, but I kind of, when I was listening to it, I was like, because I texted you on chapter 2. Mm-hmm. I was like,
yeah.
And it was kind of like,
because it gives you those vibes, for sure.
Yeah. And it was kind of a bummer, but I couldn't guess exactly what happened. I didn't know. So I'd say, like, for me personally, it was like a 7.
Yeah. I would say for me, there were a lot of things. What he did well in orchestrating, outside of some of the side characters being a little dull or just not well fleshed out, this story, and I knew it right away. And I texted you about that, about the different, and I don't want to say what it is, but there were different situations. And I go, okay, these aren't properly aligned here. And I knew that right away. I could just tell by the storytelling and the way that it was leading up. But I did enjoy that. Mm-hmm. And I enjoyed that journey because in a lot of ways, I really thought I knew where this book was going to go.
Yeah.
But I didn't know. I just knew that. So I only knew one little aspect of the predictability. Yeah. So for me, like, I was actually happy with the reveal because it led you up to that point. And then once you started hearing Alicia's diary about this thing that is constantly in her life and no one believes her.
Yeah. Poor girl.
Yes.
I felt so bad.
I start to put the pieces together and I'm like, oh my goodness, I think I know what this is. And then eventually you do know.
Yeah.
And that's what's really good about the book, because I did enjoy that kind of journey to get there. And it ended up being a very quick listen to me because I wanted to know.
Yeah.
And I thought the payoff as far as the story of what happened was worth it. But I also do think that it was cut a little short on Theo's side.
Yeah.
So, that's something that we got to also just grasp with in general. Was I did enjoy the payoff of discovering what happened, but then it kind of leaves the whole book open-ended, which some people like that, some people don't. I didn't hate it, but I also didn't love it either.
Yeah. And, for me, the ending of the book was kind of a letdown just because I had extremely high expectations. Yeah. But just because I'm a little bummed, it doesn't mean that the book's not good. I thought it was brilliant for a debut book.
Oh, yeah, that's
incredibly
pretty
impressive. Yeah, impressive. Perfect word for it. But, when it comes to books, I have high expectations for all of them. So, yeah.
So let's do this. Are you ready? Are you ready to talk about the spoilers of this book? Okay, this is gonna be really fun, guys. We are now jumping into spoiler territory. Welcome to the Knights Book Club podcast. Again, for everyone watching on YouTube, this is our spoiler edition. So let's jump right into it. The Silent Patient, Michaeli, your first thoughts.
Okay, before we begin, I'd like to give you guys the definition of red herring.
Okay.
Because I'm going to say red herring a lot. In literature, the definition of red herring refers to a misleading or a false clue. It is a common literary device used in mysteries and thrillers that can lead readers down a false path or otherwise distract them from what's really going on with the plot. So, what I found confusing was the occasional red herrings that the author left. Like at the very beginning, Theo and Diomedes were talking about fixing Alicia, and Diomedes mentioned himself stalking a woman he loved. Mm-hmm. I was like, huh? Is that common? Like, I'm always turning around looking, seeing if somebody's following me.
Right. But see, that's what's great about it, because this book, and it is a red herring, but it's even bigger than just that scene alone, because then, like, you texting me, and now we can talk about it, spoilers.
Yeah.
But you texted me and you're like, oh my God, I think Theo's in love with Alicia. And that was chapter 2 that you texted me that. And I go, yes. But I was weary of that because I go, that's almost too simple. And the way that they were, putting it in the book, and then obviously Diomedes talking about that woman that,
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, this is too on the nose, and they're leading us down a red herring, a false path here. And it was true, but it also wasn't on the same aspect.
Yeah, because that I almost said that beginning of the book. What am I trying to say? At the start of the book,
the prologue?
No. Like chapter 1, 2, 3, I didn't think he was in love with her. In a way, it felt like he was, but he was just like extremely obsessed with her. And I was like, what is this dude's problem? Like, he's a psychotherapist. Maybe he should go see somebody.
Well, see, and that was what was confusing about it, is like, you didn't know, okay, it doesn't seem like he necessarily loves her, but he seems a little too invested than he should be, right? Because let's keep in mind, Theo also left a decent job to go work at the Grove, which he knew was inevitably going to shut down.
I forgot, where did he work before the Grove?
I don't remember exactly, but I know it was a better job than this one.
Yeah, because as they say, it's a sinking ship.
Yeah. And what rats typically, jump off a sinking ship. They don't stay on.
Yeah, I was
according to
I was
Christian.
like, bro, you are not the captain.
Yeah.
Like, you can abandon ship.
So we also learn a lot about Theo during this time between chapters 3 and 10 of the book. He talks a lot about his abusive father. He talks a lot about how I almost cursed, but how messed up his life is. And how all therapists, or a lot of therapists, are messed up because of their childhood, and then they go into it trying to fix themselves. So then we get that aspect too of not just, okay, is he in love, is he obsessed, but then we're like, okay. So the author is making it very clear here that there's mental instability in some capacity with Theo. And I did like that. That was a very smart red herring to throw in there.
Huh?
Because we kind of get the background of why his life was so messed up, especially with his father, And I did like some of the dialogue, or some of the exposition that he had, where he said his father would just come home and hit him, take his belt off, and he could feel the sting and the sear of the leather constantly hitting him.
That made me so sad.
He goes and asks his mom, why does Dad get mad? And she goes, how the heck am I supposed to know? He's unwell.
Yeah.
And then come to find out, he was kind of diagnosing his father with bipolar. Like a severe case of bipolar.
Yeah. And then, Theo tried to kill himself when he was in college, and I was like, oh.
With all the pills. Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay.
So like straight up, and then that's when he found Ruth, and that's when that, ended up all happening. And
My
then,
girl.
Yeah, Ruth. And Ruth helped him a lot. She did. She was a smart woman. But then we start getting into the relationship of how he met Kathy. Now, I know for you and your aspect of this, you did not enjoy this. However, I enjoyed this very much because in order to understand why Theo does what he does at the end of the book, we have to understand how much and at what capacity he loved this woman, Kathy. And so to get that background on Kathy was extremely important for me as a reader, because I had to know, like, what were the depths that he would go. When he starts writing about Kathy, he was on a date with a different woman, but Kathy, he was mesmerized by her.
Yeah.
And like, he even told his date, no, I'm staying here and having another drink. Never talked to his date again. Was in love with Kathy.
He shot her a text. Or I think he called her. I'm pretty sure he called her. I understand what you're saying. I really, really do, with like needing to know his love for Kathy. But just me personally, I felt like it was so like drawn out.
Really?
It was like such a long internal monologue, and I was like, bro, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. Like, I would have loved personally to see, but to hear more of what went on at the Grove instead. Like, you can give us short snippets of how much he loves her and what his home life is like, but I just felt like it was so drawn out, and I was like, let's go back to the Grove.
I would say if like Kathy didn't come into play more significantly down the road, I would say yes, drawn out, but only because it's so impactful to the story. But you don't even realize that when you're reading it, right? You do just think it's this long-winded monologue about him describing Kathy, and you're like, dude, why the hell are you talking about your wife so much? Like, let's get back to the Grove. So I definitely understand that. But in hindsight, looking back, and I actually re-listened to the book again, but I appreciated that Kathy so much more because once you know the end of the book, when you go back and re-listen to that, you go, oh my God, it makes sense why he went to these lengths. I mean, this was his life, and this is one pivotal thing in that when he was talking about Kathy, and that's when Kathy met his parents. And I love this because his dad was very rude and was like, very off-putting. And then, Theo for the first time felt like a child again. That's what he says, And Kathy looks at him and says, I now understand. And I love you this much more.
When that happened, I was like, oh.
Yeah. Right. And so she understands the family dynamic. She understands his abusive past, with his father. And I think all those things combining. And then he says something so good. And this is early on in the book, but he talks about Alicia he just knew she was a great actress. Because she actually was an actress, but he knew she was a great actress back then.
You mean Kathy?
What'd I say?
You said Alicia.
Oh, I'm sorry. Kathy. Have I been saying Alicia this whole time?
No, that was the first time you said
good.
it.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Because I was like, Alicia was a painter.
Yeah. No. But Kathy was a really good actress, right? And he says that. But then when you go back and re-listen, you're like, oh my God, she was a great actress because this whole time she was pretending to really love this guy, which did she ever really love him? Or was it an act because he was a psychotherapist and they make a lot of money? She's got an unbalanced acting career. And like you start putting those pieces together. And this is why Theo was so hurt by this because he doesn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was really like going back and re-listening to the book and like
you have to think of
pulling all these little things out.
That a lot of people don't reread books and they don't re-listen to books.
Right.
So that's interesting.
Yeah. But I was starting to look at all that.
Because I didn't even piece it together when, yes, she is an actress, but I had them separate. Yeah. But they're the same.
They are. Yeah, they're the same. So you almost wonder, did she ever love him or was it the safe life for him to be in?
And I didn't even think about him being a psychotherapist and making a lot of money. Mm-hmm.
Well, and then think about how passionate their relationship was. And then once they got married, it kind of all dissipated and went away immediately. And then she started complaining about him working too much. And lo and behold, we get to the emails later on and all that stuff that develops from there. Yeah. So now that we kind of talked about all that, where are we now? So I guess we can go to the Grove now. We can kind of talk about some of the characters, or some of the characters at the Grove. Obviously one of them is Indira, which is the other psychotherapist.
I loved her.
Yuri, the nurse, Stephanie, the manager, and then Professor Diomedes, obviously the director of the Grove, and then Christian, which Christian went to college with Theo, did not get along very well. Christian's kind of a pompous prick. You just don't get good vibes from him. And I love Theo's little line in the book, too, where he goes, he's got a daughter, and I don't know what kind of a guy or what kind of a father he is.
Oof.
Which is kind of
that's a dig.
It's a dig, but you can tell Theo really does not like Christian. And I love how he goes, what's so irritating about Christian is whenever you say something, he makes you wait for his response as if he's mulling it over and thinking about what he's going to say.
That drives
and
me
you can just picture that kind of person, And I thought Christian was actually pretty well written. Because I did get a very good sense of who Christian was. I would have actually even liked a little more time with Christian and maybe one or two little twists. He could have even been more diabolical, but I felt pretty grounded overall. And then Theo meets Alicia and reads Diomedes' notes. Alicia has mostly been withdrawn, but once attacked another patient, which is Alif, with a broken plate. And Alif
was such a weird character.
So, I know, she's like big and brawly and like
I was just like, is she a man or a woman?
I was just thinking like She-Hulk the whole time. Like she would mess things
12,
up. 29. Okay,
I'll write it down.
But she would mess things up and beat people up. It was pretty funny. But no, nonetheless, let's continue on. Part 2 of of the book, chapter 1, we get Alicia's first diary entry from July 16th to 21. And this is obviously her talking about the painting of Gabriel and like how she just was painting the crucifixion of Christ. And then slowly she started to realize, oh, this is Gabriel that I'm painting.
I was like, what?
Yeah.
I'm like, you see Gabriel as Jesus?
Well,
what?
And then Alicia talks about it in the journal where it was more of, Gabriel coming into her life too, because she had such a troubled past,
like,
was her savior.
Yeah.
And so like, unbeknownst to her, like as an artist, she was painting and naturally painted Gabriel as her savior. Whether or not, obviously with the religious ties and everything, but if you're going to get upset about that, Jesus also wasn't white. So, if you paint Jesus a certain way, like it is what it is there. But
I was just, at the beginning when she was talking about that painting, I was like kind of laughing at her, but then later on in the book, you come to realize why she sees Gabriel that way. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that makes more sense now. Yeah. But it was just, I was giggling the whole time when I was listening to that because I was like, what?
So we get introduced. So that's kind of how we actually hear for the first time about Alicia and, who she is. And then we go back to the Grove and we go back to the Theo thing. And he's asking Diomedes, because Christian is the one in charge of Alicia, right? And in charge of everything. Ooh. And he's got her on a ridiculous list of medications.
Like a horse tranquilizer.
Right. Like crazy stuff. And like even Christian like brings up later on in the book, well, better to over sedate than under sedate. And it's like, dude, like, come on.
Bro,
because they don't want any problems because the Grove is shutting down. They're being spied on and all this because they're trying to cut funds and reorganize, which I understand all that. But Theo asked Diomedes to talk to Christian about reducing Alicia's meds. And this immediately does not start the relationship good with Theo and Christian, because Christian comes to him. He's super upset about that. He's like, why don't you just talk to me next time? He's like, I have no problem talking to you.
Yeah, but I understand why Christian, because, you try to look at it from both perspectives. Right. I understand why he was a little bit frustrated because...
Well, yeah, this guy just comes in.
He didn't even try to go talk to Christian first. He just went straight to Diomedes. And I'm like, if you're trying to earn respect from your coworkers, you don't do the roundabout way.
Yeah.
Because that could make Christian look bad in Diomedes' eyes. So I do understand why Christian was frustrated, because I was frustrated.
Yeah.
I was like, you haven't even given him a chance. He's different from the way he was in college.
Yeah, college.
Yeah.
Well, again, and that goes to the side of like Theo not being a perfect individual.
Yeah.
And again, there's subtle hints throughout this book that I really did enjoy. One of those being when Theo was walking into the Grove and he had to put out his cigarette real quick, because that's a sign that you haven't completely dealt.
And then he tried to bring the lighter in there, and he was like, I forgot it was in my pocket. Right. I'm like, but bro, you work at a mental institution.
And now people know that he smokes too, which is off, for psychotherapists, I guess. I'm not one.
Yeah.
But, a smoking habit means that you haven't completely figured out all your stuff that you need to in life. So yeah, let's continue on here, because this part of the story is actually really important. This is part 2, chapters 2 and 12. Theo thinks it means Alicia hasn't. Theo meets with Alicia after she attacks him. So we'll talk about that initial attack, right? Because Theo is kind of provoking her a little bit. Actually, no.
Not too difficult.
Yeah, that's actually the second time. But this first time.
Oh.
The first time he's kind of just bringing up, well, how much did you love this person, this and that? And then she gives him this look, and she attacks him. And you think, okay, well, this person's mentally deranged. They don't know. But there is a reason why
because this was after they lowered her
medication and dose. Yeah, after they weaned her off that stuff. And the big part of that, too, is like Theo only has 6 weeks to completely like help Alicia.
Yeah, because that's what Diomedes gave him.
Yeah, which is darn near impossible to help someone drastically in 6 weeks. But that's the timetable he is given.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is not a lot of time. So he's already stressed out, to begin with.
I audibly said when Diomedes gave him the 6 weeks, I was like, good luck, pal.
Yeah. So yeah, anyway, so Theo's talking about Gabriel, and then that sets her off, and she obviously attacks him. And then after he gets attacked, his head's throbbing, he's doing all that. And then Theo hears that this is not the first time Alicia has attacked someone, that Alicia has also attacked a leaf with the plate the first time, right? The whole plate incident. She provoked Alicia by asking if Gabriel deserved it, you know, getting shot 5 times in the face. And then,
my Lord.
a leaf is not a good person. She's very
hostile.
Yeah, and intentionally antagonizes people
Yeah.
in the ward. And, you know, she's like, oh, did it look good? His brain splattered on the wall and all that. And that's why Alicia attacked a leaf. But then, you know, obviously Theo's getting that information from a leaf, and he's like, huh, interesting. So did she love Gabriel? Did she not? So it's still kind of a cliffhanger at that point. And then we start to learn about Theo and the Kathy situation, okay, which is his wife. Obviously, you know, he randomly started smoking weed again. His wife hates weed. He gets high, and Kathy, not very smart Kathy, she left a laptop out, and she's been sexting, and I hope that word's okay for YouTube, but sexting with a man, an individual, online, and they are very vulgar.
And they're emailing.
Yeah, like a couple of 35-year-old jamokes. But yeah, so obviously it's revealed to Theo that Kathy is cheating on him, and he is devastated, absolutely devastated. And now that we're into the spoiler territory, I can just talk about it openly.
Yeah.
I knew right away when he was at the Grove, and then when Kathy, this whole cheating thing started coming about, I go, this is 2 different timelines. This is 2 different timelines. Right away. I swear. I told Dad, I go, there are 2 different timelines in this book. I know for a fact because it's a thriller, and I knew how this was going to go down.
That's
as far as that.
Surprising.
I didn't call the ending. I didn't call the ending until like it was getting really obvious, you know, with the man and stuff. Then I was like, okay, I get where this is going. It's obviously Theo, but up until this point,
I didn't.
I knew right away. I was like, okay, these are 2 different timelines entirely. One, he took on a new job at the Grove, but the Grove and Alicia was never really brought up to Kathy. It was, I think, once or twice, but they were completely different timetables.
He would say something like about one of his patients tried to do something, and I was like, oh.
But never names or never specifics
never
or anything like that. And I was like, okay, this is 2 different timelines. And I ended up actually being right about that. Well, let's see. At home, he obviously comes across the emails, and now he's completely unsure about Kathy. You know, obviously she's an actress. Like, what is she doing? But instead of confronting her,
oh my Lord,
he wants to go get some advice from his old friend, his old therapist, Ruth.
I did appreciate that, though, that he went to Ruth, because she basically explained to him, you know, you're so accustomed to people's unpredictable behaviors because of, you know, the way his father was. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it might have been during this part of the book when she did say that quote I said earlier.
Yeah, it was during this part of the book, yes.
Yeah, and I love her.
Yeah. Well, and she gave him some really good advice, you know, as you talked about, like with the unpredictability of, you know, he's doing this his whole life. He can't trust this woman anymore. And like the fact that she never, you know, it's one thing to cheat, and obviously that's terrible, but like she wasn't even honest with him. It never has been honest with him, even over years and years that we find out later on.
Yeah.
She still has never brought it up. And it's like, how can you trust people who will never be honest with you? You know, like people do make mistakes, they learn from it, but like to never just be honest with your partner. Theo, that's instability that like he cannot handle, especially given the way he was raised. and you know that. And like Ruth's advice to Theo was, you need to leave her. That is the best thing for you to do. Yep. It may be the hardest thing for you to do, but it's absolutely something you need to do because she's not honest with you. And, you know, Ruth was kind of alluding to, did she ever really even love you?
She definitely was alluding to that. And I was catching it. I was like, oh, man. Yep.
But, of course, we got Theo, and he thinks Ruth is wrong, and he does not take her advice.
Drives me barmy.
And that's where it would frustrate me quite a bit. That's where the book started teetering off as far as this relationship a little bit. Because I was thinking this whole time, I'm like, come on, dude. You see the emails. Eventually you go to the park. Ruth is telling you it's a bad idea. Leave her already. She doesn't love you.
Go, buddy.
But again, Theo's side of it is he's a little demented, and he kind of wanted Kathy to suffer towards the end. He had so much bitterment and resentment for her that he wanted her to suffer.
So
which is
crazy.
kind of creepy in a lot of ways too.
Yeah, I was like so uncomfortable listening to his, like, just him talking about it. I'm like, bro, you're so obsessive. Like, just leave or talk to her about it. Confront her. Say, hey, you left your laptop open. Like, I don't know.
I know, he never did. Never did. Instead, he kept trying to catch her in the act. And we could just talk about it in generalities. He even goes to a point where he goes to the woods, still not confronting her, obviously. And remember, like, the red,
I forgot about that.
The red herring where she meets up with her friend, and it actually was where she said she was going to go. But then later on, she meets up with this individual. We don't know who it is yet. But they're literally having sex in the woods.
In public.
Where
anybody could walk by.
Right. And like, the whole time, like, Theo doesn't confront her at all. It's just insane to me. And I just feel a little unbelievable because, like, come on, at some point you got to confront, all right? Like, if they're literally having sex in front of you.
I was going to say, and the fact that he just stood there hiding in the bushes and watching and listening.
Yeah.
I'm like, I feel like if that was any other man, he would have charged right after.
Right.
Like, your wife is
having sex with another man.
Like,
that's
I have no words for that. I am just...
Well, there is a word for it. I'm not going to use it on the podcast, but there is a word for it. And you also have to wonder if Theo is that, because it just did not make sense that he didn't intervene.
But his internal monologue, he was not feeling that.
Yeah.
He was, like, so angry, so devastated, so heartbroken. And then, she gets home later and he doesn't even say anything. No. I'm just like, dude, you've had so many opportunities. And he's just like, I don't feel like he loved her. I think he was obsessed with her and he had her on this pedestal. But then at the same time, she wasn't on a pedestal. She was like the lowest of the low. Well, he was just like fluctuating in between love and hatred for this woman.
Yeah. Well, and again, it goes back to the instability of his life in general.
He's so complex.
He is. He's a very complex character. Let's talk about this a little bit, Michaeli, because we're getting closer to the part 3 of this. But right before Alicia has her next journal entry, Theo meets with Max, which was Gabriel's brother. Okay, this guy is... And keep in mind, Max was adopted, so he wasn't Gabriel's biological brother. But Max is a real piece of work. Allegedly, during this whole time, he says he hates Alicia. He said she was crazy. She threatened to kill him a couple times. But Theo knew something was off right away. He knew there was more to this story that Max wasn't telling him.
Are we going to talk about when Gabriel, Max, Alicia... Did they ever give that woman a name, the receptionist? Because they kept saying...
Yes, it's Tanya.
Tanya. So they all went out to dinner because Gabriel really wanted to spend time with his brother, his wife, and I don't know if they were married at the time, but Max and Tanya. And something happened, and Alicia was really upset about it. So when Max left to go to the bathroom, she followed him, and she was like yelling at him for something.
It was for the way that she made him feel last time, because remember he like grabbed her by the waist. Oh, and it was very uncomfortable. Yeah. Like she wasn't feeling that.
Yeah, and so she was like confronting him about it, and then Max kissed Alicia, and then I wrote this down. It says the book said his mouth was full of blood and his voice was garbled
because she bit his tongue.
Yeah, and then. What was like...
Then the very next scene was them back at the dinner table.
And he was talking normally and eating. And I'm like, if you've ever accidentally bitten just a tiny piece of your tongue...
it's so hard to talk.
Yeah, it's extremely painful. So that, I caught that immediately. And I was like, bro, if your tongue's bleeding and your mouth is red and your speech is slurred, like, there's no way you could go back and eat. No. Like, what? No. And I hated Max. I hated him so much. He was the worst.
Max was intentionally written for you to hate that guy. He was not written for any sympathy whatsoever, but I was okay with it because
you knew what kind of character he was from the beginning.
Yeah. So let's talk about this. The next journal entry, Alicia writes about Max assaulting her and keeping it a secret from Gabriel. We kind of just touched up on that, so we'll move forward. But then Theo finds out Max was Gabriel's beneficiary. So this is another one of those red herrings where we're like,
I was
whoa.
like, I even texted you. I was like,
that's
why is he
so
the beneficiary?
weird, right? Like, why would Max be Gabriel's beneficiary when he's married to Alicia? But we do find out later on that he was his beneficiary because Alicia's family was so well off, and she was that he thought, oh well, Max should get this money instead of Alicia.
I thought it was Max.
I did. I was like, okay, and then you start thinking about the guy outside, getting mad at Alicia because he obviously hated her. But I just felt like it was too on the nose. But nonetheless, it was a good red herring
too on the nose
for a lot of people. It actually ended up working out. And then Diomedes tells Theo to stop contacting Alicia's relatives because he's nonstop.
He's going full investigator mode.
Right.
I was like, bro, you're a psychotherapist.
And like, as Diomedes is telling him, okay, no more talking to relatives, he finds, what's his name, Paul, her cousin. And he's like, yep, coming over anyway. Just completely. And so now he's starting to be unethical in his behavior towards this work.
Definitely.
And then that's when I was like, okay. Now he's being unethical. What other steps is he going to take to escalate this where it's completely not just unprofessional, but criminal?
Criminal.
Right.
Yep.
And then you start thinking about Alicia and like, what is his motives here? What is Theo's
motives?
Because
at this point in the book, he's not getting a lot from their sessions. She's just staring at him. And at one point she does shake her head, but that's as far as he's gotten. And so he's like, I need more. And he, even from the beginning of the book, before he even met her, he was obsessed with her.
Yes.
So
we get into it. He obviously meets Paul. He goes to meet up with Paul. Paul knocks him out because he thinks he's an intruder. I'm like, okay, really?
So
Are you kidding me? And then obviously he wakes up and it's revealed that Lydia, which is Paul's mom, which Alicia stayed with Lydia, she's kind of on her deathbed, but she's just an angry old broad, just very grumpy, and you can tell that there's a side of her that even scares Paul to this day, because Theo talks about that a lot in the book, and he goes, Paul had this very childlike behavior, as if like he was stunted in his development and growth into like a young adult, because I think Paul was like late 20s, early 30s at this point, but he said he kind of still had that mentality of a teenager, kind of that scared little boy with Lydia, who's even on her deathbed. But Paul never got out of that life, but Alicia did. And you see that in the journal a lot with Alicia talking about kind of how she feels bad that Paul was still there. And she had sympathy for him. But that was another, we'll just talk about the relationship between Alicia and Paul. That was another thing where I was like, okay, where is that going to go?
Plot hole.
Because Paul inevitably, we find out through the journal that Paul shows up and needs money because he's in a bit of a rut because he spent all of Lydia's money. And
almost all of their savings.
All their savings, like 20,000 pounds. And he's like, I need 20,000 pounds. And then Alicia gives him 2,000 pounds. But then, like, that story just didn't go anywhere. And I get it. It might have been a red herring again, but you still kind of had to tie something into that.
The writer focused so much on that. Like, it was very, not in a bad way, but it was very drawn out. And near the end of the book, I kept thinking about it. I'm like, okay, well, whatever happened with Paul and the money that Alicia gave him?
Yeah.
Nothing.
It was
and then she said, don't tell Gabriel. And then she ended up telling Gabriel literally right when he got home.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was definitely kind of weird. But then we start getting this little turn because now Theo's in full, Scooby-Doo mode where he's like Sherlock Holmes walking around with a magnifying glass. And he goes to visit Alicia's art gallery. And this is where we get really introduced to Jean-Félix Martin. I don't even know why. I don't think he has an accent or anything, but Jean, I do love that name. No, he probably does. But, we meet Jean and then says that Gabriel hated Jean because Jean was always Alicia's friend growing up through college. They were super close, like BFFs. And we never really knew if Jean loved Alicia or if he loved, and then we find out later on it wasn't Alicia he loved. It was the art that he loved because he was a narcissist. And he literally just cared about himself. He didn't really care about people. He cared about using people to get what he really wanted. Yep. And then that's why you see that separation because Alicia starts to know that as she gets older.
Yeah.
You know, and she really wants to separate from Jean. But to go back to this, Theo shows up and then he sees all of the imagery and all the paintings that Alicia has made before that fateful day. And, you know, he sees the Gabriel Jesus. He sees Alcestis.
This next one's so funny.
He sees the Lydia painting.
Yeah.
Which was absolutely hilarious. And the way they describe this is Lydia in bed with fat oozing over the bed. And even Theo got a good little chuckle out of that in the book too. And he goes, I see why Lydia was so upset about the painting. Because, you know, Theo talks to her a little bit and she's irate about it.
She's just so angry
He's
and she doesn't
her
even
stupid
know.
bee and because, you know, she stayed with Lydia all those years and this is how she repays me, that stupid bee, you know. It was pretty interesting, pretty funny.
I did get a good laugh out of that. I'm not going to lie.
But then Theo finds the copy of the Alcestis story. So he's kind of studying into this Greek philosophy. Yeah. And long story short, it's like to make it as simple as possible. In it, her husband is Alcestis. Her husband is fated to die. Apollo allows someone to take his place. Mm-hmm. And that's when Alcestis agrees and dies in her husband's place. And then Hercules resurrects or rescues her, but then she comes back and Alcestis does not say a word. Yep. So that's kind of the mystery there is like, why did Alcestis stay quiet? Was it due from anger, from sadness, from shock? Like what were the reasons why she stayed silent all that time?
And there's the callback to the author having was it a Greek father?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. That's the callback. Mm-hmm. When I found out, because, you know, I was doing, like, my research for the outline, I was like, oh, that makes sense why he used, like, you know, Greek mythology, because his father is Greek. And I don't know, I just thought that was kind of cool.
Well, that's what's cool about, like, authors or screenwriters is they do take these little aspects of their lives and kind of mold them into stories.
I thought the whole story with Alcestis was absolutely, like, it was gorgeous. Yeah. I loved the writing about it, you know, how well he explained everything. Because, you know, Greek mythology can be kind of confusing. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I just really appreciate the way he kind of dumbed it down.
They simplified it without, like, they simplified the story without making you feel like you were dumb.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm sure there's a lot of nuances and all these little things within that story that make it more compelling. Mm-hmm. But you got what was necessary from that Greek story to where we didn't have to spend a half an hour, you know, reading into the intricacies of Greek mythology. Right, which was really nice. Yeah. So we move on to part 2, chapter 22. We're darn near done at this point. August 2nd. Paul asks Alicia for money to pay off gambling debts, which we already talked about. And then Theo arranges for Alicia to be able to paint. So this was interesting too, because I actually like this idea.
I did too.
And this was something that I saw coming and I wanted to actually happen because I wanted to know, what is Alicia going to paint? Me too. And they inevitably do give that. And then Christian kind of warns Theo. Remember, he's like, hey, she's seducing you. Like, you're going far and beyond here. And he goes, I'm just trying to help you out.
She's just trying to get what she wants. Exactly.
And what Alicia paints, and I love the description of this. This was actually one of my favorite parts of the book because the painting is so powerful when it's described. But it's Alicia does a painting of the grove burning with Theo carrying her out. But what he says is, I can't tell if I'm carrying her out or throwing her off the ledge. Yeah. That's powerful. Oh. And that's how Alicia always has all of her paintings, is she's very stoic in the ALCESTIS. Yep. So you don't know what her emotions are. When Gabriel is her savior and he's on the cross, you don't know what his feelings are about being that. Mm-hmm. And now with this, Theo said he didn't know if he was carrying her or throwing her off. And that's powerful because you don't know where Alicia's head is. Yep. And that's what makes a good artist, you know, kind of that open-ended aspect of her art. And how she's feeling.
And that's where, when he said, I don't know if I'm carrying her out, saving her, or if I'm throwing her in, that's where in my head I was like, yeah. Okay. Right. Oh, I would love to see these paintings. Oh, my word.
I know that's something that, like, for this book, it would have been nice to have, like, an artist come in and just paint these just so we get a better idea.
Or just, like, you know, just on the page, the next page, you flip it over and you see kind of... That would have been cool. That would have been super cool. Yeah.
Maybe someday someone will. A really good artist will do it.
If I was artistic, I would do it.
But we are not. So Theo, and then obviously the last part of this part 2 was Theo talking, to Barbie, and then this is kind of where we get introduced to. This is where Theo finds out that there was a man around, and that Barbie heard from Alicia that there was this man that was stalking her, but no one agreed, or no one believed, I should say, Alicia, because of her prior mental health concerns in the episode that she did have. So then her husband just thinks that she's going through another episode, because where they lived prior, she accused this old man who was just like, walk in, just like doing yard work. She's like, he's stalking me. And the old man's like, I'm 87. I don't know where I'm at. Well, honey, my wife, I'm blind. Yeah. Well, he was blind in the book, which is hilarious.
But once again, I'm just like, she genuinely thought somebody was stalking her. Yes, he did turn out to be blind.
Yeah.
But that was a real person.
But here's the thing, Michaelides, which is so brilliant in this aspect, because normal people, right? Like, yeah, you're totally right. Like, why would you not just believe your wife and at least, but again, he's not in love with her anymore. So he doesn't care the same way that he used to, because he's seeing Kathy at this point.
True.
So like, that's what's actually good about this writing is like, when I realized that listening through it a second time, I was like, oh,
just leave.
Yeah.
Get divorced.
But like, he didn't even care. So at that point, he's like, just go see a psychiatrist. Like, just go see Christian. And then we find out later on, Christian was her, psychiatrist under the table, which is crazy. And then he's working at the Grove. So now you think Christian's implicated in this whole thing, that maybe he had something to do with it. Maybe he was a crazy stalker of Alicia, But yeah, so let's jump into part 3 here. We are almost done. Part 3, chapter 1. August 8th to 25th in Trees. Alicia tells Gabriel about a man hanging outside of her house, obviously. Gabriel's skeptical. We've kind of went through all this. She keeps seeing the man around. She suspects is either Jean, because remember, she said, after this one, I don't want my art pieces to be in your art house anymore. We're separating ways, and Jean was very upset because he only cares about the art. He doesn't care about the friendship. And he used that against her a lot. Yeah. She didn't know if it was Jean or Max, because Max was also, saying some horrific things to Alicia and very mad. And obviously lover. Yeah. Like, not consensual, but he was obsessed with her.
Yeah. Well, the shrink's name that Gabriel wanted her to go see was Dr. West.
Dr. West. Yep.
Yep.
Christian West.
Yep.
And this is where it's revealed that Gabriel and Christian actually knew each other. Which is pretty crazy.
So odd.
Which is, wild. But it was unofficial and unreported because Christian at the time could have lost his license because he wasn't actually like a psychotherapist at that time. And then Theo confronts Christian about it, and we get kind of that confrontation, and now Christian's kind of at the whim of Theo, and Theo down the line is going to use that against Christian because Theo's not a perfect character in this. So he also says she has crazy and absolutely delusional. So we talked about Theo. What next? Do we just want to jump towards the end here? I feel like
we should talk about Alicia's last diary entry.
Oh, yes. What was her last diary entry? That would have been part 5 here, right?
Oh,
I'm trying to think where that is. Well, yeah, let's talk about her last diary entry because I had a big problem. I don't know where it is in our notes, but I had a big problem with the diary entry because it's like, dude, if there is someone breaking into your home, you're not going to write 2 pages about, and now he's in the cupboards, and now he's cooking me food. And I mean, he's not cooking, but now he's breaking in. Now I hear the door. Now I hear this. And I'm thinking,
that is literally what I wrote down.
And I get it. It's a book. So like you have to illustrate that into some capacity, but you didn't. And like the only way we hear from Alicia is through her journal. So I do have a little grace for it. Yeah. But I just wish it could have been described in a different manner. Maybe when Alicia came out and finally actually started talking with Theo, that's when you could have like brought that story up more so.
Yeah, that's why it was kind of annoying though, is because we only got Alicia's side through her diary entries.
Yeah.
And there just was not a lot of diary entries. And that just irritated me because she is such a complex character. And, you know, yes, we do get parts of Alicia through Theo, but that's through Theo.
Yeah.
And, you know, he's crazy. He's a very odd character. And I don't know, I just wish we could have seen more of Alicia's perspective on things and what happened. Because when we do get her, it's just basically delusional rants, you know, near the end of the diary entries. And so that was just kind of frustrating.
Yeah, I totally get that. So we'll talk about this though, because this is where Alicia finally does open up and starts talking. She intentionally gives gives Theo the wrong story, not the real story of how these events happen.
My word, yeah.
And then you start to think, why is this? You know, at this point I kind of put two and two together. I was like, okay, there's something going on. But I actually didn't at this time know that Theo was necessarily it for sure, just because of the Herrings of Jean and Max. But then she lies, and then Theo kind of gets upset about that and knows she's lying.
But near the end, when I'm not sure exactly what he said, but he was like, and I knew she was lying. Something like that. My heart dropped because that was the end of the chapter, and I was like, oh my God, what just happened?
Right, because he said it with so much
conviction
because he knew what happened. And then you're like, oh my God.
You're like,
He is, before I start this next chapter, I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say, oh, he is the guy. He is the guy. And then that's when you discover that he was actually the one stalking Alicia, but it wasn't him stalking Alicia. What he was doing was following Gabriel, because think about this. After, you know, Kathy and Gabriel had sex in the woods, he didn't follow Kathy home. He followed Gabriel home.
And was that the time he grabbed the rock?
Yes, because he was like going to kill Gabriel.
I'm like, bro, just get a divorce. Crazy.
Yeah,
what
I know,
are you
dude.
doing?
Just get a divorce. Like, it's not that big a deal. Like, I mean, it is a big deal, but
but
don't kill someone over.
You don't need to murder somebody.
Yeah. Like, relax, pal. You're lucky a random person walked by.
Maybe Gabriel and Kathy. Oh no, I was gonna say maybe they didn't know that they were married or
no, they definitely knew both.
I know,
but the thing is,
once I started that sentence, it was already out.
it also shows the unpredictability of Theo himself too, and that he's still dealing with a lot of stuff to be able to get so mad on this aspect that he would murder Gabriel, who's kind of the third party, and he is culpable. Like, he shouldn't have done that. He's also married himself, but it was very interesting to see that development in Theo, just to see how upset he was about the whole situation.
Yeah.
So then we find out all of that, and we find out that Theo is actually the guy, right? Through this discovery, like through this like monologue that Theo has, and he kind of gives his reasons for doing it. He's following Gabriel home, and then he was looking time to time, but he wanted to go in there and talk to Alicia and warn her and give her the same closure that he had, right? But he didn't know Alicia's mental state.
Yeah, but just the way he did it.
So let's talk about that. So the ALCESTIS, obviously the story of the Greek mythology, we know the story. We've already talked about that. So what Theo does is he breaks into the home. He ties up Gabriel and ties up Alicia.
But
and they're
didn't
facing
he tie
away
up
from each other.
Alicia first, and then Gabriel got home?
Yes, yeah. And Gabriel got home, and then he tied.
But I'm like, why
too.
tie up Alicia? Why don't you just sit down and talk to her? And
because he wants to prove a point. He's doing the ALCESTIS. The story of ALCESTIS. This is literally what he's doing.
But did he know about ALCESTIS first?
Yes. Remember, he went to the art gallery years ago and fell in love with the ALCESTIS, which she painted.
But ALCESTIS came out after she murdered Gabriel.
Did it?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe that was the last painting. But either way, yeah, that is true. Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure that's what happened.
Yeah. But anyway, he wanted to do this. He wanted to do the story of ALCESTIS.
So dramatic.
I'm forgetting now, I guess. That's the biggest point of the book. I can remember all these little things in the book, and then like the big thing, I'm like, hold on, when's the time frame on that? But whatever. And he has them, he's tied them up back to back, and
couple feet
he
apart.
tells Gabriel, basically, just laying it out on the line, it's either her or you. Who's gonna die?
And Gabriel says nothing.
And he goes, I don't want to die. And what does Theo do? He wasn't going to kill anyone, but he wanted Alicia to understand the man that she was with, because he breaks in about how Gabriel's cheating on his wife and then basically gives him a choice. It's either you or her, and he chooses her, which is the story of ALCESTIS.
Mm-hmm.
And
I felt
unties,
so bad for her in that moment.
Because like Gabriel thinks, because he shoots one round in the air, so he thinks that Alicia is dead,
and then
he doesn't say a word.
Yeah.
He unties her, lays the gun down, and walks out of the house.
Yeah. He
didn't know the mental state of Alicia, and Alicia, obviously, that's some ground-shaking news, especially when she has those mental problems from her upbringing as well. Mm-hmm. And to have the one person in your life, like who was supposed to be the closest, most intimate person that you could always trust, and then to have them cheating, not telling you, and then say, kill her, not me, it pushed her entirely over the edge.
Well, and then something we didn't bring up before is when Gabriel went to Paul and Lydia's house, or not Gabriel, sorry, Theo went to Paul and Lydia's house. Paul took him up to the roof where they used to sit when they were children, and he learns the story of Alicia and her father and what happened. And, Alicia's mom had mental health problems. She drove into like this wall with Alicia in the back
Alicia
seat.
in the car.
And when Alicia got home after that, because she was young, I don't know how old she was, but she heard her father say that she wishes Alicia was the one who died.
Yeah.
And on the Audible notes, I wrote down, like, I couldn't even imagine my dad saying that about me.
I know.
Even not knowing that I was in the room.
Right.
Or if I even was in the room, I would be completely devastated. Like, that would affect me.
Oh, that's earth-shattering, especially as a child.
Like your own dad, the person who's supposed to protect and love you and care for you, saying that he wishes that you died instead. Like,
yeah.
So, that's, like, abandonment problems. And then fast forward, to now, Gabriel was just going to offer her up and be like, you can die.
Yeah.
I would rather live. Like, that probably was the last straw for her with
Absolutely.
her mental state. Like, yeah, so continue. I just wanted to bring that.
But that's actually a really great point, because we hadn't even touched up on that at all. But you are right. It's the abandonment issues that she deals with to get behind the psychology of Alicia. So it's a really good point that you make, and I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Because it is so true. And then for Gabriel to essentially do the exact same thing the father did, saying, I would give you up for this person. Gabriel goes, I would give her up so that I can be with Kathy, or that I can continue to live.
Yeah.
Pushed her entirely over the edge. So then basically we find out that Theo was the one behind it all. Mm-hmm. Theo comes back to the Grove the next day, and he finds out that Alicia OD'd. And this is obviously where we get the journal entry, and we'll wrap it up here because it's been an hour. We've done an hour. Look at that, pretty good.
Really quick, something that I just remembered. When Alicia did start speaking to Theo, because we didn't even touch upon that.
Oh yeah.
When, during like the therapy session, when she actually started speaking to Theo, finally after 6 years, she told him like the whole story, all of that stuff. And then didn't she like start breaking down and crying at one point?
Well, she deliberately told him a lie towards the end.
Yeah.
Because she knew at that point.
Remember when she like was talking and was going through everything? Theo at one point said, I want to hold her, I want to hug her, and I want to kiss her. We didn't ever bring that up. And I think I texted you or something, and I was like, he literally said he wants to like kiss her. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I just thought I should bring that up because that was something that really stood out to me. I was like, bro, you're her therapist. Like, what
Relax.
are you doing?
But that's where it leans in towards the unethical behavior.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to bring that up.
So basically at the end, Alicia ODs. We don't know whether or not she's alive or dead. She's kind of in this like weird like coma thing. And then they find her diary in the back of the ALCESTIS painting. Or not the ALCESTIS painting. I'm sorry. The painting of the burning, which was defaced by a leaf. Remember that. But they find it in the back. Come to find out, in the journal, or the diary, whatever you want to call it, Alicia kind of lays out the whole thing of him.
What did he give
ODing.
her? Do we know?
I don't know. Yeah, I have no idea.
Why didn't
I'm
they
not a
Narcan
scientist.
her?
I don't know.
Give her some Narcan.
Yeah. But nonetheless, it kind of leaves on a open-ended note because Alan's reading the diary passage to Theo, and he's kind of just smoking a cigarette, and that's kind of how the book ends. So we assume Theo was arrested for that.
The final part of the book makes no sense. So it started snowing. He puts his hand out the window, and he's just like catching the snowflakes, and then that was it.
That was the end of the book.
That made me unbelievably angry.
Because it was so open-ended.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I feel like eventually Alicia could come out of the comatose state. Because we didn't, I don't know, I just felt like the ending of that was so rushed, and it made me so angry. Because, you know, the rest of the book was, you know, it was good, and I'm still angry about it. It's been like 2 weeks, and I'm like so frustrated.
All right, well, let's talk about kind of the overall, what we would give this book. I'll start first. As far as like rating narration from a 1 to 5, I definitely enjoyed the narration. I thought the voiceover actors were great, so I give them 5 stars on that. For the overall story, there were elements that I really enjoyed about this book, and I think Alex has got a very bright future for writing books. I thought some elements were missing. I thought some of the side characters were just not well fleshed out enough. I would have liked to hear more from Lydia and Paul and kind of got and dissected more into how messed up Alicia's family life was growing up, outside of just the horrific thing that happened to her with her dad and the obviously mom driving into a brick wall. So overall for me, I'm going to give the story 4 stars, or just a story 4 stars, but overall I'm giving this book, I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 overall. I enjoyed it. I initially was going to go 3 out of 5, but then actually going back and re-listening to it again, there were a lot of things that made more sense the second time around, but there were definitely some loose ends that were never tied up. And for that, I'm going to give it 4 out of 5. And then my last little question is, would I recommend this book to other people? Yeah, I would. It's not a perfect book by any stretch of the imagination, and it wouldn't make like a top 5 for me or something like that, but it is a good book, and I think worth listening to, especially if you like thrillers and mysteries, because there was an element of surprise, and I didn't catch everything, you know, on this book. So
yeah, I would have to say my narration rating would definitely be a 5. I thought the guy who did Theo, immaculate. I thought he did wonderful, as well as Alicia. You know, I thought it was great. My overall would probably be like a 3 or 3.5.
Okay.
Just because I'm a critic.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's good. And like, what were the elements where you felt in this book like fell short? Some things that you could like, you know, say, we could improve upon this.
I would have to say like the red herrings. There were just a lot.
There were.
Like just a ton. You know, like a lot of it just didn't make sense. Like it was just thrown in there just to be thrown in there, and that frustrated me because I was hoping that everything would tie together at the end and make it like, oh, that's why that character did this and that's why that character said that. But there were just so many loose ends. For a debut book, it was wonderful. Yeah. But, you know, I'm a critic first, an appreciator second. Yeah. So, yeah, I'd have to give it probably like 3 out of 5 stars.
Okay.
Because Theo just drove me barmy.
So I'll ask you this: would you recommend this to someone who maybe
I have? Yeah.
Oh, okay. So yeah. So the
one of my
answer
coworkers
is
an Audible listener, and I was like, "Oh, you should, you know, listen to this book." And Alicia was with me, and she's like, "I thought you didn't like it," and I was like, "My opinion is very
kind of sporadic over because there were elements of the book that I know you enjoyed, because you and I talk a lot. We just talked an hour on it.
Yeah.
So we do enjoy it, but like there were some things that definitely could have been better or better explained.
Well, and I told it was our cousin actually, Jonna. I was like, you know, if you'd like to hear a more in-depth review.
Go ahead and check out the brand new inaugural podcast, Knights Book Club.
Yeah, but, you know, I'd probably listen to this book again, and I probably will, but, you know.
And it's weird, too, because I actually found myself enjoying I enjoyed it the first time for sure, but I actually enjoyed listening to it the second time because there were those subtle little things that I picked up on that I didn't pick up on the first time. And that's what I like about thriller mysteries. Yeah. If it's even halfway well written, you can go back a second time and pick up those little things that you didn't know. Because you know the end of the book, you know, the second time around.
And easily my favorite part of the book was the whole ALCESTIS thing.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah. He had a really good idea with that. It was hands down my
favorite. Yes. I thought it was, I don't know, I just thought it was so wonderful. And Greek mythology is very difficult for me to understand. And the fact that I can understand ALCESTIS and everything that happened was highly impressive. Yeah. So props to you, Alex.
Absolutely. So do we have anything else left on The Silent Patient before we announce our book for next week? No, we good?
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is our full review and summary of The Silent Patient. We both would recommend the book, despite some of its minor flaws, but we had a very good time with it. So let's talk about the next book. So The Silent Patient was a book that you chose.
Yep.
And it was crazy because it was on both of our wish lists. And like, we had no idea. Like, this was like when we first mentioned, like, starting the podcast. And then we were like, yeah, we got to think of a book. And you're like, The Silent Patient. I'm like, Michaelides, look, it's in my wish list. So, because I've been an Audible listener since 2014, so a very long time. And I just love listening to books. So the next book was actually my selection. It's a brand new book that was just released, and it's called The Maid.
By Nita Prose.
Yes, it is it's kind of like a thriller, murder, mystery style book.
Yeah.
But I have, in all transparency, I've already listened to it one time. I'm going to go back and listen to it again.
I haven't.
But yeah, I'm very excited. I'll put it this way. I'm excited to talk about it and talk about some of the things with you and the character.
Well, I did listen to
Molly the Maid.
To the first chapter.
Yeah.
I think.
I know it's going to be funny to talk about that, but I'm very excited. So look go in, if you guys want to follow along with the Knights Book Club, we will be posting the books that we're going to be reviewing a week in advance. So that way you guys can download them from Audible and give you time to listen to them and kind of engage in the conversation with us in the comment section. It'll be fun. But The Maid is the next book that we're going to do, Michaeli. Are you excited?
Yeah.
How do you think this went? Honestly, the first podcast we ever did.
I was extremely nervous. And I don't know. I thought it went pretty well.
So do I. I really do. And
even though we did jump around and stuff.
We did jump around a little bit. That's fine. And we'll get a little bit more organized with the notes and stuff. But like for a first podcast to be able to do this, like I felt the conversation was really good between you and I. I felt like we touched up about a lot of the important things throughout the book. Mm-hmm. And we're only going to get better. I mean, it's episode 1.
Yeah.
You got to give each other a little grace. But you did a great job. Seriously.
I did cut you off about solid 25 times, but it's fine.
You did what?
I cut you off.
No, you didn't. No, the conversation's been great the whole time. I only had one mistake, which I'll go back and edit out.
I have the timestamp.
yeah. But that's actually pretty good for me. I don't think I've ever been on a podcast for an hour and 15 minutes.
We should probably re-listen to it and make sure we both did.
Yeah, I don't think we did. But nonetheless, Michaeli, this was a lot of fun. Guys, if you liked what you've seen here and you're watching on YouTube, please be sure to smash that like button, comment below, and subscribe to the channel. Go and check out our Instagram, Knights Book Club. It's just Knights Book Club, or is it Knights Book Club Podcast?
Just Knights Book Club.
I like that better. So Knights Book Club, go check that out on Instagram, guys.
TikTok,
we're going to be dropping there. TikTok as well. We're going to make clips. Facebook, all those social medias, guys. Thank you so much for watching and listening. My name is Mason Knight. That is my sister, Michaeli Knight. And until next time.
Bye.
Bye.